Hello and welcome back to KnightHunter Books. Today we're doing the 7 Deadly Reading Sins tag after it was suggested by Brittany Reed. We'll link her video down below. Please go and check it out.
So the first question, greed.
Mm-hmm.
What is your most inexpensive book?
This might not look inexpensive. It's a slip-cased, numbered, signed special edition of A Feast for Crows by George R. R. Martin, which I bought for £1 when Borders were shutting down. A big book chain in the UK that died, and they actually got in a lot of trouble because they had a lot of stock on sale or return, and they liquidated it all for next to nothing, and the publishers didn't get their money back. That said, we do have multiples of this, so if anybody would like to make me an offer.
And expensive.
I have at various times played role-playing games. The books for these tend to be quite big and quite expensive. This book is gorgeous and pretty, and I've never played it.
What is it?
It's the Dresden Files role-playing game.
And based off Jim Butcher's series.
Yes. It's a book that exists inside the world it describes.
Oh, okay.
So one of the characters in the series decided to create a role-playing game in order to educate people in the world about the monsters that existed and how to fight them. And this isn't a finished copy of the version that exists in the world. This is a draft with post-it notes and editorial scribbles from lots of different characters in the book, and they've got all the voices absolutely bang on. It is a fun book to flip through. But, yeah, flown from the States, hardback, not the cheapest book in the world. Especially
Do you know how much it was?
Yeah, don't want to comment. So, what's your most expensive book?
Again, I'm going to go for a relative one. I probably have bought more expensive books, but this, Jonathan Safran Foer's Tree of Codes, is probably the length of a short story. Novella.
That's a lot of pages
possibly.
for a short story.
They're quite thick pages. It's only 130 pages. £25 for a very good reason. It's a bit of a stunt book, really. Jonathan Safran Foer made a short story out of his favourite book by cutting out bits of it. So this book, I don't know how well it's going to come out, is each page is individually die cut and you're only left with the short story. So it's so beautiful. So I have read this once. I do remember quite liking it. It was very lyrical, kind of reminded me a bit of poetry, which I suppose makes sense when you're very limited by what words you can use. You're not going to be able to make a punchy story out of it. So yeah, I did really like it, but I read it in under an hour. My plan is, I want to read this again when I read the original, back to back, because I think that would be a lot more interesting, so that I can read the story it's been made from. So, maybe a review in the future when I get round to that, but Street of Crocodiles is a long book.
Next one is Wrath. What author do you have a love-hate relationship with?
See, I struggled with this one for all of about a minute, and then you reminded me of Orson Scott Card, and I realised that was exactly the relationship. So, Orson Scott Card has written some really good books. I absolutely loved Ender's Game, and then I started working my way through the series.
And your whole family read
Yeah,
them?
I got my brother and my dad into them, and it was great, and we all talked about them. And then I read a bit too much on the internet. He actively puts the money he makes from his books towards anti-gay rights groups, which is not something I want to financially support, so I find ways around it. This is probably the only thing I look out for in second-hand bookshops. So what about you?
This is Gardens of the Moon. It's the first of the Malazan Book of the Fallen, of which I've read all of them. And then I read his new novel, Willful Child, which is horrible in so many ways. I think the comment I had at the time is, if you imagine somebody's watched Futurama and looked at Zach Brannigan and gone, that character's awesome, he's great, why is he not the hero? And then written an entire book about the philandering, racist idiot. And I haven't been able to read anything of his since. It's kind of annoying in a way.
Okay, so next, Gluttony,
Mm.
from the t-shirt. Which book have you devoured over and over again?
This is just an exemplar. This is Night Watch by Terry Pratchett, and I have read it quite a few times, but it's more emblematic of the fact that for a very long time Pratchett has been the only author that I've reread a lot. It's pretty much comfort reading. Such a warm, fuzzy and yet slightly cynical view. So what about yourself?
Harry Potter is my probably only really obvious answer. I don't tend to reread books very often. But the only other one, which I thought would be more interesting to talk about,
Since everybody reads Harry Potter a
yeah,
lot.
is
I'm
Darren
rereading
Shan's Cirque du Freak series. It is a young adult or middle grade series of vampire novels, and they are incredibly short and incredibly quick. And every time a new one came out, then I'd have to reread the series, and it wouldn't take me very long. It's only 12, but they're so small. This one's only 170 pages.
Ooh, and it's got that lovely old book smell. So, as you wafted it at my nose.
I have had them a while. So, yeah, this one, I think, and Harry Potter.
Sloth, what book have you neglected reading or neglected finishing due to laziness?
This one, which is really heavy, does spring to mind. It's Haruki Murakami's 1Q84, which is in some places published as 3 parts or 3 separate books. We have a bind-up, which I think is partly why it's scaring me. It's like 900 pages, and they're really big pages. But I really like Haruki Murakami. I still haven't read all of his books, but, you know, I find them pretty readable. I've read some of his other quite long ones, and it's a dystopian setting, which I love. So there's no reason for me to not pick this up, except for the fact that I'm lazy and it's just my arms. It would just weigh me down.
Maybe we need to buy an ebook.
Yeah, that might be the solution to this one. Although I do really like it for the shelf. And you?
Again, this one is probably emblematic rather than particular. So this is Bad Science by Ben Goldacre, which came out quite a while ago.
I bet the science will even be true in it now.
I have a bad habit of wandering through the non-fiction books on sale and going, ooh, that looks really fascinating. I have quite a large to read shelf for non-fiction, and I've just said, right, I'm not allowed to buy any more non-fiction.
When's the last time you read a non-fiction?
That's a really interesting question that I would need to wade through Goodreads to be able to answer.
Yeah.
So I might get around to it one day if all the fiction gets stolen. But that's probably about the only opportunity. I think a general rule of thumb I should use in future is, if I wouldn't read a long blog article about it, maybe don't buy the book.
At least. The next one is Pride. What book do you most talk about in order to sound like an intellectual reader?
Having just admitted to never reading non-fiction, I don't do this a lot. However, Information, Entropy and Progress by Robert U. Ayres probably qualifies.
I'd be sold that you sounded intellectual if you tried to talk to me about that.
Yes. Thinking about it, this might actually be the last non-fiction book I read, but yeah, I'm not going to talk about it now, it's really, really dry and boring.
Yeah.
On the
We
other
don't
hand,
need evidence to know that you can sound intellectual if you talked about that.
buy me a pint, I will rank.
So, I can't really think of when I've done this especially, although I do quite like... There are certain types of books which I buy because I like to talk about them. And
This is another stunt book, isn't it?
yeah. This is one example. Mark Z. Danielowski's 50-Year Sword, which you might know him from The House of Leaves, which is a well-known stunt book. So this book is another short one actually. It's probably only a novella. It's a ghost story, essentially, told from 4 different narrators, and absolutely filled with illustrations as well. So I'm going to try and give you a feel for it. The running theme is sewing. So you can see the front cover has tons of holes in it, which I quite like. But then inside, it's also got a really lovely cover, which is filled with illustrations made out of embroidery as well. It's really pretty. The reason I talk about this intellectually is the narrators, which, honestly, I'm not sure I got it, so I'd be really bad at trying to talk about it intellectually. So, it's absolutely full of quotation marks in 4 different colours to represent the 4 different narrators, but they're nested all the way in. So one person starts telling the story, someone else interrupts. I'm sure it's you're meant to be trying to work out who the narrators are and things about their lives from what bits of the story they're telling, I think. Which is why I can't talk about this intellectually, but if I ever did, I'd research this book and the true meaning behind it all. I just read it as a fun ghost story that was really pretty.
The next one is lust. Lust. What attributes do you find most attractive in characters?
Trick question? I like the complicated characters that it takes you a while to actually work out their motivations and generally the dark and brooding ones. Fiction's different, right?
Fair enough.
What about you, before I dig myself in too far?
I tend to like a type of fiction I've heard referred to as competence porn. So, watching people who are really very skilled do what they do and just do it with style.
I can definitely appreciate that, and I'm awesome at everything. So,
yeah. Great, that works perfectly.
Envy. We're coming up to Christmas. What book would you most like to receive as a gift? This is why we're doing this tag, just so I can get this answer.
I hope not, because this is not going to be helpful. Probably a voucher. Honestly,
Yeah.
while I like owning books, books are awesome and they are all over the house. I think I get enjoyment out of actually picking them and buying them as much, if not more, than I do actually owning them.
Yeah.
Which is probably why the to read pile is quite as full as it is.
Mine would probably be the book I mentioned earlier, House of Leaves. I've seen these floppy paperback editions, and it's so long. I'm like, I think I need a hardback. But then I've also heard that there's an edition where every time the word red appears, it's coloured in red, which I don't think adds anything to the story, but I want it. And unfortunately, now what I want is the hardback red edition, which I'm not sure even exists. I think I looked at it years ago. It's either prohibitively expensive or doesn't exist. So, if I'm asking Santa, who can magic things into existence, that's what I'd ask for. I probably won't put that on my Christmas list this year, though, with anyone I want to remain friends with.
Fair enough.
So, that is everything. All the questions. I don't think we've come up with anyone specifically to tag. So, if you are new to BookTube or have been around a while but still haven't done this tag and you want to, consider yourself tagged. And then feel free to post the link down below and we'll check out your video.
Thank you for watching KnightHunter Books.
See you soon.